In 2017, there was a group returning to Italy from Medjugorje by sea, landing at Ancona, and from there they proceeded to the shrine of Loreto, the holy house. The priest happened to be an exorcist. He had with him in the group 2 young people who were under the influence of the other side, and perhaps the degree to which that was the case was not known. It all blew up when this girl, who was 23, and the other one, who was only 14, were introduced to the inner sanctum, the holy house itself, within the Basilica of Loreto. And there, the demon couldn't bear it. The howling, the screeching, the screaming that resulted ended up in a demand on the part of the priests of the sanctuary that the priest, the exorcist, command the demon to not disturb everyone there. And the demon did calm down, and it led to a conversation, to which was completely recorded on a mobile phone. He spoke in intelligible and correct Italian as commanded to, and many things came out. He was obliged to admit that it was the real thing. That had also come out in a much earlier exorcism in the same place in 1489, when a French noblewoman, Antonia, who was possessed, was also a means of obtaining forced admissions from the other side. In 2017, the demon was obliged to confess how he had refused, like the good angels, to adore a human being, that is, mankind, represented both by the Son of God and in its supereminent form, this woman that he was shown, of whom he would have been some kind of servant. He would not accept this subservience to an inferior order, and he created his own kingdom, and indeed his own house. And he was admitting also how he couldn't bear that place. He had always tried to destroy it, the holy house. He had used his faithful servant, Herod, as he called him, to massacre of the holy innocents, which only increased his own damnation, Lucifer's. But that Herod was with him in his house, as he put it. He was obliged to admit that his brother Gabriel had been there, and indeed that he was there right at that moment. The incarnation had taken place there, and he couldn't pronounce the word that caused it actually to take place, fiat. He told the priest to say it for him. It was the word on which our redemption was hanging. And it is written there in that holy house, hic verbum here the Word was made flesh. He was obliged to admit how every stone, even every grain of dust, was most holy and most precious, far more so than even the stones of the Vatican itself. It was the most holy place on earth. And he went on to say how he had always tried to destroy it. He had used, and he actually said, his servants, the Muslims, and he had always failed. He had then tried the theologians, inspiring them to do his work for him by persuading people that it wasn't the real thing, and also mocking them with their intellectual pride, and also indicating indirectly the consequences of their words and actions, for he did hint that they might be ending up in his own house. He was obliged to admit his hatred for the litany of that place, the litany of Loreto. He was obliged to admit how he didn't have permission to enter the family where the rosary was prayed. And on we could go. The Word was made flesh. On this day in Wales, we recall something that happened when those words were being pronounced. It was actually by a Welshman of our area who spoke our form of Welsh, the North Walian accent, and his area was where our roots are, more or less. And he was a student at Oxford, at St. John's College. We were able to celebrate there in the year 2010 with our local bishop, recalling how he had been there. At that point he was in the state church, but he went to Notre Dame in Paris and was received into the Catholic Church, and then got involved with the Benedictines and was part of the maintaining of the ancient Benedictine line in exile. He was in Valladolid, and eventually he was sent back on the mission. He discovered that there was somebody on the same boat who was a spy, but he craftily escaped. He helped the poor in London for a while during a plague, and that made him actually quite popular. But they suspected him, and they found a place where they thought he might be, and he wouldn't open the door. He was actually celebrating Holy Mass, and they were bashing at the door, saying, "Open up in the name of the King." It was by then King James I, who had been James VI of Scotland. He wouldn't stop the celebration, and he was actually at the last Gospel, et verbum caro factum est, and he contained in his person the sacred species that he had just consecrated and consumed. He was taken immediately when they bashed down the door and caught him at that point, and he was eventually willing to admit in court that he was a Catholic priest. That he did so that it could be clear that he was dying for that motive and none other. And he was hanged, drawn and quartered at Tyburn on this day in 1610. We had a relic of his at Gillilan, where we used to have the Welsh Mass every month, and that relic would help us when we wanted something. He would always answer. When the new bishop came in some years ago, he requested that all these relics be centralised in Wrexham, and so it was taken away. Interestingly, when that happened, the bone started to disintegrate. Maybe the saint didn't want to leave our area, where he was well venerated. Friends of mine had at the place where he had grown up, Rhugorch, an old house. As regards the Benedictines, we had that link in our parish in Cardiff. When the abbot of the monastery that had the care of our parish, Ampleforth, Basil Hume, was made Archbishop, they had on the evening of that ordination day, the 25th of March 1975, Vespers in Gregorian chant in Westminster Abbey, and my spiritual father, Dom Lawrence Bevernote, who had been head of the choir in Ampleforth, but by then was in our parish, calmly said that he had gone there to prepare things at the organ before the brethren arrived, and he was there to welcome them into his own monastery. It was through Dom Sigebert Buckley that the line had continued. He was an elderly monk of that abbey, Westminster, and he had given the rites of succession to 2 young novices, and the succession had gone on in exile. Hence the old Benedictine habit in the English Benedictine congregation with the elephant ears. Dom Basil Hume, later then Cardinal Hume, commanded the respect of all, for he was a man of learning and of deep spirituality. That commands respect across all the boundaries. And he always answered every letter personally and immediately. A lesson for all in authority. He was the one who made it possible for me to be received into the church under age. It happened at Ampleforth, in St. David's Chapel, and he gave me Holy Communion at midnight, at the midnight Mass of Easter. It would be well to pause on this day and to be aware of the fact that we have the true line, both in the monastic world and in the apostolic succession itself, and that we have the fullness. The fact that the demon is obliged to say so in different screams and howls here and there is an indication that that is the case in itself, for he's admitting things against his will. Years ago, in the 80s, they asked Our Lady about this question, and she answered with regard to the true church discreetly in this mode: the fact that I am appearing all over the world in Catholic churches should be an indication for you. This then is our faith that we possess serenely with all the centuries, knowing that the devil hates the Catholic Church for that very reason, and is doing all he can to weaken it and to attack it. He's far more interested in the true church than in any other body. Indeed, in one exorcism centuries ago in Switzerland, he mocked the Calvinist pastor who came to try and expel him using his own prayers by saying the prayers that he himself had inspired had little power against him. And when it came to his using his own elements from the Protestant celebration, the demon simply scoffed. He knew perfectly well the inefficacy of a consecration made by a priest who was not a priest. And so it is, we see how clever he was to maintain the buildings in England and Wales, but to remove the presence, that same presence that we had in the Holy House of Loreto, which sanctified it, while the Mother of God and St. Joseph and the Holy Child lived in peace among the angels of God. The same angels that protect the presence here, wherever the Blessed Sacrament is. Et verbum caro factum est, et habitavit in nobis. Child of an end, chased for the overthrow, dost thou this night recall to whom below these parts of earth at once to heaven were wed, these silent choirs where once thy feet did tread? Dost thou still hear the echo of this pause in ancient song that long flowed between the pores of heavy stone, where buried lies a one, a patient spring, unknown familiar smile. Ova mentira sadinta daini, agavien urbanas goviadi, aglavi grimi dandon matharois, agrendios dig canadi voidrois, Emainam vaina bedrot lebihoin, agras legint ad